Introductory Lecture to Amharic Grammar, given by Yonas Ketsela, February 27, 2025. Dear friends, in this first lecture, I will be introducing you to the study of grammar. I am well aware that what we will be studying here is Amharic grammar, but I found it extremely significant for us first to have a clear idea of the very unique approach I take to the study of grammar. As it usually the case, if someone else were to introduce you to Amharic grammar, the usual approach is to delve right into the mechanics of the language. They will start by dividing Amharic words into verbs and nouns. Then they list a bunch of words that belong either to the category of verbs or category of nouns. But it is easy to see this simple approach might be useful for kids whose thought life is poor and undeveloped. But when you are a grown-up and you are an adult learner, curious about the nature of language, you will need a different approach that is more reflective, meditative, and intentional. And that is what I am trying to do here. Thus, it is very important to understand first the philosophical significance of the division of words into verbs and nouns. As you know, in a school grammar book, these divisions are simply taken for granted, and there is no meaning or ideas given as to why this division into verbs and nouns is necessary. What I mean is that there is no thought reflection, a psychological meaning given to these divisions. But you will know that this is not just for grammar, but for any of the educational materials that are given to us, that is, for instance, in mathematics, physics, biology, astronomy, and the like. There is no any psychological and philosophical reflections given to us. So it is really up to us now to look back and reflect on what we have been given since we were kids. Since we are mature enough now to arrive at a stage where we can look back and reflect on why we took these materials for granted when they were first given to us, we can now begin to see them on a different level and study them from a higher perspective. As a thought experiment, we can begin first with numbers. What you learned in school about numbers, unsurprisingly, is very arbitrary and devoid of any meaning. Do you think you know the meaning of numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Why do they repeat themselves in a certain discernible pattern? You think you know them because you can count them or label things with them. But in reality, even though you know how to use them, you don't understand them. You do not have the psychological meanings of these numbers. It is a sad reality today, for most students who graduated from colleges anywhere think that they understand numbers because they can count. And they do not even realize the source of their ignorance and dissatisfaction with their education is because they have not been given genuine effort in understanding the psychological meaning of these basic and obvious things they learned when they were kids. Numbers here are not just the special case, but this is the case for alphabets. People know how to say them, but they do not understand their meaning. As well, logic, astronomy, and music, and like all these things, people would know them mechanically, but they do not understand them psychologically, and this is the most terrible thing I have seen in the education of most people. So, it becomes extremely difficult to educate people because they do not even understand the basics. How can you teach someone logic who doesn't even know how to count properly? How can you teach philosophy to someone who doesn't even understand the basics of grammar and who does not differentiate between words and ideas? So, this is the kind of thing that we are dealing with today, the problem that is superficiality and the most misguided life of many adults. Now, we are given an opportunity here to embark on a different learning method. And be mindful that the method is what is essential in education, not the material or the contents of education themselves. Because these contents you have been given since you were 7 years old in kindergarten. But the important thing is now you look back and learn about the psychological or philosophical meanings of what you have been given, with a different method and attitude. We speak here of a method because there is a huge difference between learning something consciously or unconsciously. From what you learned unconsciously, you think and act on it unconsciously, so you will not be expected to be thoughtful, and this robs you of freedom from your spirit. But from what you learn consciously, you can act consciously and creatively, so this will enhance your freedom of spirit. And this is the most essential thing for you to understand now, dear friends. Therefore, I might call this kind of approach a psychological approach to studying grammar. The language we are interested in now is Amharic, which is an extremely interesting language because it retains so many of the qualities that we want in a language, that is, first of all, the psychological meanings. Needless to say, English is the most abstract and unconnected to the psychological reality, or the correct way to say that is, English becomes an intellectualized language, and it is devoid of intuitive content that we appreciate in a more poetic and ancient language, such as Amharic, Ge'ez, and others. It is the language of a culture and people who are extremely imbued with a natural world and a social reality. So, this is an adventure for us to reflect on the inner meanings of this language as much as we are invested in the understanding of the mechanics and the logic of the language itself. This is the kind of approach that we are going to give to the study of grammar in this course. Thus, I begin this first lecture by reflecting on the basic ideas we know in grammar. So, first, let us ask some valid questions that will guide us into deeper meaning. The first one is, what is grammar? To answer this question, you would not need to go deeper into logical analysis, but you can simply reflect on your own self on what you do on a daily basis. You would find yourself using other words of which you are not fully conscious. You command, you express wish. You indicate or point at something. You tell a story. You justify and rationalize. You blame, you express or hate or express antipathy towards something. You judge something as either good or bad or true or false. All these are the psychological meanings which connect you with the language. From this perspective, you can see that the problem is you. You are getting in the way between words and the things of the world. From another perspective, you can also see that when we communicate with one another, we use words to express our thoughts, feelings, and the impulses of will. Oftentimes, we notice ourselves being misunderstood. Sometimes, we could not quite put words to the feelings and thoughts and wish we would like to express to another person. So, all these are the sphere, or you might say, the field of study for us to observe how we relate to language. You may notice the problem with the study of grammar and the usual sense in the way we are studying in the school is that we delve into these mechanics or technical divisions and details without any thoughtful reflections on why we do those things in the first place. Or, you might say there is no self-reflection. No one is really looking at himself when studying grammar. We study grammar from someone vague third-person perspective. He or she is the one who is speaking this language. He or she is the one who is trying to communicate feelings, thoughts, and the impulses of will, using this language as an instrument. Without this self-reflection, so many wrong ideas are introduced in the study of grammar today, especially in modern times. Many people master the mechanics of language, but the psychological understanding of language is poor, and the meanings they associate with words are usually wrong. You would easily find more wrong ideas communicated amongst us. And this is what is harmful about language. That is when people are using it without giving it enough reflection. They simply use it wrongly or unconsciously. In this fact alone, some modern philosophers, such as Ludwig Wittgenstein from the late 19th century, argue that so much of the disputes in philosophical literature come from the poor understanding of language or grammar. And he tries to show this through rigorous, logical analysis. And you may feel free to go and look up some of these philosophers and learn what they say about the nature of language and its problematic nature. However, my goal in this lecture is not to talk about the philosophical problem, but to really guide us into the phenomenon of grammar itself. Instead of simply beginning with what is grammar and giving a formal definition of it, I will begin by asking, where is grammar? Is it in our head, in our hands or feet? Is it in our heart, or is it outside our skin, somewhere in the air? The people will grab it and play with it, just like soccer players play with a soccer ball. Or does grammar have any inner significance to psychological life? Or again, will I also say, the other way, does grammar has any objective significance to the world that we see around us? For instance, when we say sky, does this word, and the letters sky, their combination have any significance to the sensible phenomena we look up with our eyes above? And you can take many other examples similar to this. What I am saying is this: what is the objective significance of grammar on one hand, and what is the inner significance of grammar on another hand? These are the two important questions that we have to reflect on as we study grammar and look at it from a higher perspective. Does not require any significant training in philosophy or logical analysis. Simple thoughtfulness, different simple thoughtfulness is enough to learn so much about the significance of grammar after all. This is the daily tool that we use every single day to communicate with other people, and in fact, communicate with our own self. Can you for a second think or have thought in your head without associating it with some words? How about your self-talk? The thoughts that are running in your head every moment of your day is scripted in the form of words. So, this is a significant thing for us to think about. Now, when we come to the most essential element of grammar, we say that it is words. Now, when we look at words in themselves and try to understand their significance in their own terms, we can begin to see that words are symbols for something that is either sense, perceptible, or supersensible. On one hand, words are essentially consisting of images that we receive through our senses. For instance, as I mentioned above, look at the word sky. This word conveys or symbolizes a sense-perceptible image of the sky that we have perceived at one point or another. Of course, the vividness, intensity, and depth of this image depends on the individual in question. That is to say, the richness of the experience. One person may have a very vivid and rich experience of the sky, whereas another person may not have a very rich and vivid experience of the sky. We can say he has more abstract and poor image of sky, but another person with a more lively and engaging experience with a natural world. We have a very rich experiencing of the sky. And we will talk about this thing in another place when we talk about the inner significance of words. But for now, what I really want to draw your attention to is that words are symbols that signify, on one hand, sense-perceptible things such as sky, trees, clouds, sun, moon, stars, mountains, animals, fire and water, etc. You can just list so many nouns that contain these sense-perception qualities. Words, on the other hand, as symbols, point at supersensible phenomena. That is something that we cannot perceive, or their origin is not that of the world that we see and experience in our life. These symbols do not have definite images, but are rather formless and abstract units. It is easy to show examples. Take words such as freedom, God, thought, feeling, wisdom, beauty, hate, love, desire, wonder, etc. So now you begin to see that these abstract words that we use our daily life do not have a definite image in them. So when we talk about God, for instance, with someone, he does not have a vivid image in his head. So no wonder there are so many disagreements and different opinions about what every single one of us understands by the word God. The reason being, this is not something we can easily point out and say, hey, can you see that? That is God. So, our communication must take a different form when we talk about these kinds of supersensible phenomena. We might say that what we need is inner intuition to reach a certain conceptual vision that will give us a clear picture. So, when someone say that, I believe in the Christian God, and I also say that I believe in the Christian God, this agreement must come with a definite conceptual clarity, which is a kind of inner seeing. Thus, I call this kind of fact a supersensible thing because we cannot really see God with our physical eyes. But internally, with the psychological and inner meaning that we give to this word, we can have a definite form or idea associated with this specific term we use. So, as an introductory note, let us keep in mind what I have discussed so far. And to recap, it is very significant for us to differentiate two essential qualities of words. The first, which is pointing at supersensible phenomena, such as freedom, God, or wisdom, etc. The second quality is that words are symbols for definite sensible phenomena, such as sky, sun, moon, trees, plants, animals, etc. So, this needs to be categorically distinct in our thinking. We have to be invested internally to consider that to talk about sense-perceptible phenomena is not the same thing as talking about supersensible phenomena. So, this will give us a certain inner willingness to see the problem with the language and with our ways of communication. But if this is not the case, most people, as it is the case with everything, try to take these distinct differences for granted and try to force a language in the way that will lead them to misunderstanding and confusion. Needless to mention here, a single word in the Bible could be interpreted in 100 wrong ways, so this will be a cause for divisions into denominations. This has been the case in the past, and this is the case now. As you recall, there is a single word that became a cause of the division between Eastern Orthodoxy and the Catholic Church. This is only to give one common example here, but one can easily find such examples in our lives every single day. People will take our words in the way that they want, and we also personally use words in the way that we did not intend them. You see, this is an important thing for us to consider so that the study of grammar primarily should be about the fact I just talked about here. The study of grammar must lead us to clarity of thought and inner life, as well as the outer life. Grammar should really ground us in the psychological meanings of words, not leave us with dark and empty abstract words. So, by studying grammar, we will enhance our internal life and our psychological maturity. We will be able to relate with the world consciously and with others, as well as with ourselves. And this should be the goal of this science. I hope to make a certain contribution to this approach in the series of lectures I will be presenting to you in the coming days. Most importantly, you yourself, by engaging in this approach, will also contribute much to this science, which means for us now so much more than the study of dead and abstract words, as is the case today in usual academic settings. But by taking up this personal initiative in your self-education, you will mark a very significant point in your intellectual and psychological life. I look forward to meeting you with the next lecture next time. Warmly, Yonas Ketsela.